WQAD News 8, this is WQAD This Week.
Good morning. It's Sunday, November 20th. Thank you for joining us for News 8 This Week. I'm John Diaz. For the past few weeks, railroad workers from the two biggest unions representing engineers and conductors have been voting on a new contract. That's the tentative agreement 12 unions reached with the Class 1 railroads back in September, less than 24 hours before the end of a mandated cooling off period that meant tens of thousands of workers could go on strike. Now, one of the issues at the center of these contract negotiations has been time off, or the lack of it. News 8's Jenna Webster has been covering BNSF workers' fight against a point-based attendance policy. In a moment, we'll sit down to talk with Jenna, but first, in her special report, she brings us an exclusive behind-the-scenes look at one engineer's life on the railroad.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Your friendly neighborhood locomotive engineer here.
For 12 years now, Joel Lewis has dedicated his life to the railroad.
All right, so this is kind of what it looks like on the head end.
Working as an engineer for BNSF.
And once we get that light from red to green, we'll take off.
He spent a month documenting his time working on the railroad and living away from home.
All right, I just showed up at the depot.
Good morning, folks. It's about 4 a.m.
This trip I'm going to go about 290, 280, 200 or so miles north. Hotel, depot, home, hotel, depot, home.
Taking us behind the scenes for an exclusive look to show just how unpredictable the job is.
When you're on call 24/7, 365, when your only time you're not subject to call is the 10 hours after you tie up or get off work. Everywhere you go, you've got your phone in your pocket. You're worried about missing a call.
In an average month, he'll spend around 200 hours on the train and another 200 hours in a hotel room.
Going on about 24 hours of being awake here.
While it's never been a typical 9 to 5, he says it's been a frustrating 9 months since BNSF started High Vis, the points-based attendance policy where railroaders lose points for days taken off.
You know, it's Halloween, so then it's Halloween's a high impact day. So if you want to know the days they punish us most for taking off are the days that you'd like to spend with your family.
It means having to pick and choose.
Well, yesterday was my wife's birthday. Today is my daughter's senior night for football cheer.
And picking and choosing to lay off or take off those 2 days meant having to sacrifice something else.
It looked like I was going to be able to attend my brother's wedding on Saturday, but everything stopped moving.
Conductors and engineers were ready to strike over the high-vis attendance policy last winter, but were blocked by a federal judge in Texas. It all comes down to the Railway Labor Act making a rail strike extremely difficult, but also the impact a strike would have on the supply chain. Now, under the high-vis policy, the only way to earn points back is by working 14 days in a row. And it's a policy Lewis says is here to stay.
There's a camera right there that watches everything that we do.
The 12 unions representing rail workers spent nearly 3 years negotiating a new contract with Class 1 rail carriers like BNSF. The tentative agreement reached in September includes an immediate wage increase of 14% and 24% over the next 5 years, stretching back to 2020.
Money's not the thing, you know. I mean, the money's good. A lot of people are upset because there's no quality of life issues that are being put in there.
That would be staffing levels, such as mandating 2-person crews and paid sick time. It's why the unions were asking for the new contract to include 15 paid sick days.
Which I thought we were never going to get that, but I thought a couple, you know, if we got a couple, that would help out.
Instead, workers will be able to schedule 3 instances throughout the year for medical visits. But the catch is that they have to request 30 days in advance, and they must take place on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday.
I don't know when I'm going to be sick, but it does help in the framework that doctor's appointments are hard to get to.
And there's no language that says the carriers can't switch to 1-person crews, something that concerns Lewis, who would be on the train alone.
I was stuck on the side of a hill at 3 o'clock in the morning with no cell service. I had dropped the conductor off at one point because we had issues. Never had panic attacks before, ever. And then after that incident, sometimes, you know, just a little bit.
It's a job with long days in an 8x8 box.
So imagine going 30 miles an hour for 8 hours straight.
And a job he believes less people will be signing up for because of the quality of life issues. But this contract right now might just be the best they're going to get.
I'm not saying I'm a yes or a no vote. You're never going to get everything you want. If you can get little bits at a time, kind of stick your foot in the door, leaves it open to negotiations later. It's not it's not what everybody wants to hear.
For now, life on the unpredictable railroad will keep rolling down the tracks.
Here we go. We're going to go
move some freight.
In Galesburg, Jenna Webster, WQAD News 8.
And Jenna Webster joins us now. Jenna, I want to kind of just take us back a little bit, give us background on the negotiations, where we've been and where we're at now.
Yeah, so it's honestly a very long story, believe it or not, because these railroad unions and the major freight Class 1 rail carriers, their workers have been without a new contract for 3 years now. So these have kind of been ongoing negotiations since 2019, on and off, just not being able to reach an agreement. And it was finally in September when they were right ahead of this midnight, like Friday midnight strike deadline, which was the end of a cooling off period, kind of some of the railway labor terms. It was that day before that they finally announced that they had reached this contract agreement after, these 3 years of negotiations. And the rail unions have kind of been going around saying, like, this is a really good deal and it's the best deal that we've gotten you, even though the unions didn't get everything that they asked for in this contract.
And how were they able to operate so long without a contract? Is that pretty standard?
It's just, it all has to do with kind of the Railway Labor Act. Like it's not like other places where you don't have a contract and you can strike. There's so many hoops that they have to jump through to be able to reach a striking point, which is kind of why it's been now 3 years that they're kind of at that, why everyone keeps saying, oh, a looming strike. It's been 3 years of on and off negotiations that have finally, hoops that they're jumping through that are finally leading up to this.
And that speaks to the impact that a actual strike, if that were to happen, would have not only on the workers, but really the entire national economy.
Yeah, it's one of those reasons why striking is so difficult and why it's kind of really not even an option for workers, because it doesn't only impact freight. They say that about 30% of freight is moved by the rail, so that would obviously all stop if there's a strike, but it impacts Amtrak and it impacts some commuter rails that operate on those tracks. Those would shut down also. So the railroads have said if there's a strike, it would cost about $2 billion a day for the country's economy.
Let's get to Joel here.
Yeah.
Joel has been vlogging about life on the railroad. Why was he interested in kind of recording this?
Yeah, so I mean, he and I have had conversations on and off for a while about kind of what it's like working for these major freight carriers, and just how it's kind of changed over the years. It's always kind of been a very demanding schedule. You're away from home a lot, but recently, there's more people leaving. There's less people on the workforce, but it's just a very unpredictable. You don't predict when the trains come, and they run at all hours of the day. So I approached him with this kind of, let's show people what it actually is like, because you can say so many times, oh, this is kind of what our lack of a schedule is, but let's show the times that you're showing up to work at 2 in the morning because you got called in at midnight, kind of thing.
And what was your takeaway, especially after seeing the videos? Because first you have the conversation with him. I'm sure he's sharing some of the difficulties, but then you see the videos that he created. What was your takeaway?
I had no idea some of the things that went into it. That I didn't know you're on the train for 12 hours, that you're going 30 miles an hour. He was like, imagine like sitting here for that long, just traveling 30 miles an hour. Like you're like, it's slow, and it's just them and one other person in this really small, like 8x8 box at the front of the train. But I think something that really stuck out to me is that there's time that they're considered off from work, but they're spending that time off from work in a hotel room. So it's not really time off. You're away from your family. You can't go to your doctor's appointments. You can't run your errands that you would typically do on a Saturday and Sunday for most people. You're sitting in a hotel waiting for a call to go home.
One thing that stuck out to me was, and it sounds like part of the negotiations or part of what they were asking for, is these two-man crews and making that a mandatory thing. And he talked about how he ended up getting stuck in essentially the middle of nowhere, I guess you would say, no cell service. And, you kind of imagine these guys are pretty tough. And he talks about kind of the panic that he felt in that moment.
Yeah, and two-man crews is something that they are very passionate about keeping, and it's something that it can't even be in these national contracts. It's kind of a separate thing that has to be mandated, but yeah, it is something that workers are very concerned about. And kind of what they say is that, oh, the railroads don't care that all these people are quitting because they want to push through one-person crews. But for people like Joel, he's like, I would be the only one there, and you're going into these rail yards that you've never been to, and you gotta push the train and, you know, hope it works out. And he's like, there's only so much training you do. So he's like, it's just like a scary, stressful situation to do on your own.
Let's talk about tomorrow, Monday, kind of an important day for at least a couple of these unions. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so they've been voting by mail. Ballots were sent out in end of October timeline. They have until 11:59 tonight to get all those ballots sent in, and these are the two largest rail unions, the conductors and the engineers. They're about a third of all rail workers. They're going to be announcing on Monday, hopefully, the results of that vote. And that's kind of the last unions that have not voted yet. Everyone else of the 12 unions, 7 have voted yes, 3 have voted no. One of the ones that voted yes was originally a no vote, but have since voted yes. So this is kind of the last group that we're waiting for to see what they do with this contract.
All right. Well, we'll know, you'll keep an eye on it. So thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, we are going to track in some nice rebounding conditions as we head throughout your entire afternoon. When can you expect temperatures to get to 50 degrees? We're talking about that coming up next in your accurate forecast.